Leviticus chapter 17:1 The Lord said to Moses, 2 Speak to Aaron and his sons and to all the Israelites and say to them, This is what the Lord has commanded. 3 Any Israelite who sacrifices an ox, a lamb or a goat in the camp or outside of it, 4 Instead of bringing it to the entrance to the tent of meeting to present it as an offering to the Lord in front of the tabernacle of the Lord, that person shall be considered guilty of bloodshed. They have shed blood and must be cut off from their people. 5 This is so the Israelites will bring to the Lord the sacrifices they are now making in the open fields. They must bring them to the priest, that is, to the Lord, at the entrance to the tent of meeting and sacrifice them as fellowship offerings. 6 The priest is to splash the blood against the altar of the Lord at the entrance to the tent of meeting and burn the fat as an aroma pleasing to the Lord. 7 They must no longer offer any of their sacrifices to the goat idols to whom they prostitute themselves. This is to be a lasting ordinance for them and for the generations to come. 8 Say to them, Any Israelite or any foreigner residing among them who offers a burnt offering or sacrifice 9 and does not bring it to the entrance to the tent of meeting to sacrifice it to the Lord must be cut off from the people of Israel. 10 I will set my face against any Israelite or any foreigner residing among them who eats blood, and I will cut them off from the people. 11 For the life of a creature is in the blood, and I have given it to you to make atonement for yourselves on the altar. It is the blood that makes atonement for one's life. 12 Therefore I say to the Israelites, None of you may eat blood, nor may any foreigner residing among you eat blood. 13 Any Israelite or any foreigner residing among you who hunts any animal or bird that may be eaten must drain out the blood and cover it with earth. 14 Because the life of every creature is its blood. That is why I have said to the Israelites, You must not eat the blood of any creature, because the life of every creature is its blood. Anyone who eats it must be cut off. 15 Anyone, whether native born or foreigner, who eats anything found dead or torn by wild animals must wash their clothes and bathe with water, and they will be ceremonially unclean till evening, then they will be clean. 16 But if they do not wash their clothes and bathe themselves, they will be held responsible. Leviticus chapter 18:1 The Lord said to Moses, 2 Speak to the Israelites and say to them, I am the Lord your God. 3 You must not do as they do in Egypt, where you used to live, and you must not do as they do in the land of Canaan, where I am bringing you. Do not follow their practices. 4 You must obey my laws and be careful to follow my decrees. I am the Lord your God. 5 Keep my decrees and laws, for the person who obeys them will live by them. I am the Lord. 6 No one is to approach any close relative to have sexual relations. I am the Lord. 7 Do not dishonor your father by having sexual relations with your mother. She is your mother, do not have relations with her. 8 Do not have sexual relations with your father's wife, that would dishonor your father. 9 Do not have sexual relations with your sister, either your father's daughter or your mother's daughter, whether she was born in the same home or elsewhere. 10 Do not have sexual relations with your son's daughter or your daughter's daughter, that would dishonor you. 11 Do not have sexual relations with the daughter of your father's wife, born to your father, she is your sister. 12 Do not have sexual relations with your father's sister, she is your father's close relative. 13 Do not have sexual relations with your mother's sister, because she is your mother's close relative. 14 Do not dishonor your father's brother by approaching his wife to have sexual relations, she is your aunt. 15 Do not have sexual relations with your daughter-in-law. She is your son's wife, do not have relations with her. 16 Do not have sexual relations with your brother's wife, that would dishonor your brother. 17 Do not have sexual relations with both a woman and her daughter. Do not have sexual relations with either her son's daughter or her daughter's daughter, they are her close relatives. That is wickedness. 18 Do not take your wife's sister as a rival wife and have sexual relations with her while your wife is living. 19 Do not approach a woman to have sexual relations during the uncleanness of her monthly period. 20 Do not have sexual relations with your neighbor's wife and defile yourself with her. 21 Do not give any of your children to be sacrificed to Molech, for you must not profane the name of your God. I am the Lord. 22 Do not have sexual relations with a man as one does with a woman, that is detestable. 23. Do not have sexual relations with an animal and defile yourself with it. A woman must not present herself to an animal to have sexual relations with it, that is a perversion. 24. Do not defile yourselves in any of these ways, because this is how the nations that I am going to drive out before you became defiled. 25. Even the land was defiled, so I punished it for its sin, and the land vomited out its inhabitants. 26. But you must keep my decrees and my laws. The native-born and the foreigners residing among you must not do any of these detestable things. 27. For all these things were done by the people who lived in the land before you, and the land became defiled. 28. And if you defile the land, it will vomit you out as it vomited out the nations that were before you. 29. Everyone who does any of these detestable things, such persons must be cut off from their people. 30. Keep my requirements and do not follow any of the detestable customs that were practiced before you came, and do not defile yourselves with them. I am the Lord your God. Quote. Leviticus is the book of access to God, of instruction in how to worship. Worship is nothing more than laying hold of God. We don't worship when we simply bow our heads and let some kind of pious thoughts run vagrantly through our minds. We worship when we lay hold of what God is. Though it may seem dry reading, when we begin to analyze it, Leviticus opens up as a great book which gives us tremendous lessons in the life of worship. In Leviticus, The Way to Wholeness, Stedman commenting on, "You are to be holy to me, for I the Lord am holy, and I have set you apart from the peoples to be mine." Lev. 20:26 writes that is the purpose of the book of Leviticus. It details the way by which man is made holy enough to live in the divine presence and to enjoy a relationship so close that God will delight to say, "You are mine." Don't be turned off by the word holy in this passage. Most people associate holiness with some kind of grimness. They react as did the little girl who happened to see a mule looking over the fence at her. She had never seen a mule before, and she said to it, "I don't know what you are, but you must be a Christian, you look just like Grandpa." To many of us, holy people are those who look as if they had been steeped in vinegar or soaked in embalming fluid. But the scriptures speak of the beauty of holiness. Ps. 29-2, KJV. True holiness is therefore something splendidly attractive. The original root from which the word holy is derived is the same root from which a very attractive English word also comes. That word is wholeness. Holiness, therefore, means wholeness, being complete. If you read wholeness in place of holiness everywhere you find it in the Bible, you will be much closer to what the writers originally meant. Quote. Leviticus is a book of instruction designed to make all that God is available to man, so that all that man is may be available to God. Its theme is access to God. It begins with the story of the tabernacle, that wonderful building where God dwelt. If we could have climbed to a mountaintop and looked out over the wilderness area where the 12 tribes of Israel were encamped, it would have been a strange and wonderful sight to see this vast assemblage spread out on the plains in perfect order and symmetry, each of the 12 tribes in their particular place. As we walked down the mountain and passed into the camp, we would have come through all the thousands of Israelites until we came to the outer court of the tabernacle. Then, going through the great open gate, we would have passed the altar of sacrifice and the brazen laver, and would have come to the door of the tabernacle itself. Moving through the mysterious and marvelous outer veil, we would have come into the holy place, where were the showbread, the altar of incense, and the great golden candelabra. Beyond stood the inner veil, and behind that, if we dared to enter, was the Holy of Holies. The only article in that room was the Ark of the Covenant. That mysterious vehicle was the dwelling place of God, with the mercy seat above it and the 2 cherubim with their wings covering it. There too, in a marvelous way, shone the Shekinah light of God's glory. It was a place of fearsomeness. The only one who dared to enter was the high priest, and then only once a year with the blood of the goat of atonement, in order to make atonement for the sins of all the people. All this is a picture of God's dwelling in the midst of his people, showing how they could have fellowship with him. The book of Leviticus is designed to teach us 3 major principles. The first is representation. That is, we never would have been permitted into the Holy of Holies, had we been part of Israel. Only the high priest could go in. But when he did, he represented the whole nation. By that representation, the nation began to learn the wonderful principle of appropriating the value of another's work. After all, this is exactly what we are asked to do, isn't it? We are asked to believe Christ died for us, and that we died with him. And all of our victory rests upon our ability to appropriate the work of another who is our representative. God began to teach this to the world in Leviticus. The second great principle or truth God began to teach was his adequacy. The book opens with the institution of 5 offerings, each one speaking of Jesus Christ in his death for us, each one showing how a basic need of human life is fully met already in what Christ has done, and all of them together showing us that there is nothing we will ever run into which hasn't already been taken care of. Therefore it is absolute unbelief to come to God and start asking him to do something for us which he hasn't already done. What is necessary is not to plead with him to do something new, but for us to start believing and appropriating what he has already done. The third great truth God began to teach was that all of the representation and all of the adequacy become expressive in our life, become actual in terms of our experience, by the simple act of obedience, of faith in action, faith moving, acting upon what has been done. Leviticus is that book of instruction. If you read it in conjunction with the book of Hebrews, it is one of the most illuminating studies in all of the Bible. Leviticus, the way to wholeness.